So over here, if you look at the colors, just to be maximum, this is going to be lighter than this one. This one's a wine finish. It's Cabernet. I actually, I don't think I put your Halacha on it. I did. Oh well. I don't know if you were involved with the transport, but I was on the phone. You were. I called you up when I was in the distillery. I had to do everything myself under Star K. I went up to Engel Winery in KJ, picked out myself, drove it up.
What did you do?
The oak barrel. I wanted a wine finish. Where does the wine finish come from? What's the history of it? And is it something sought after? Is it all hype? And is it bitul b'shishim? What's the story? So let's go back to the origins of the barrel. The barrel is the main method of transportation of anything in the world. In the 1800s, it was gas. They would transport in barrels. Everything was transported in barrels and was reused. A barrel, an oak barrel, could last 70 years in standard distilleries. If you go to Spain, it's used for 200 years. As a matter of fact, the older it is in the Solaris system is you refill the barrels, wine, and then it's kind of like a pyramid. The top's the freshest wine. After 2 years, you'll always take from the oldest barrel, and you'll just put it in a loop going downwards. So one barrel we're going to have is the Solera barrel. It's not very common to have a whiskey finished in a Solera barrel, but will make a Clea Hydrani look weak. It's so saturated with wine through and through. That's one it's common. Every distiller has to make himself stand out. They'll go ahead and get that barrel. The next one is obviously going to be sherry port, which are both reinforced wines. The wine is, generally speaking, could ferment to 9, 12, even 15% alcohol, depending on the yeast that's used and the sugar content of the grape. Sorry. Port is and this is important. It's generally higher in the U.S. It's 18%. In the U.S., the category I believe is 18%. Then it becomes a hard spirit, different legal. U.S. it's 18. Europe is 21. And it's a reinforced spirit, meaning they took wine, sherry wine or whatever, they distilled it, then they put it back into the wine, and then they age it like that. So sherry and port, this is a very important question when we get back to the shilas. But this is getting a little ahead of myself. What's the story with the barrels and what's going on? So in the whiskey industry, as most industries, it wasn't a commodity. The purpose of it was to get drunk. That's why we had prohibition in the United States. You had all these other movements in Europe against alcohol, right? And it wasn't viewed, except for wine. Wine was, in the sense, in a word, would be, to sit down, drink, taste, and enjoy. But the whiskey was viewed always as evil, and they outlawed it. They never had anything specifically focused on whiskey to say this is a flavor for many years. It was always cognac was for prestige, whiskey, gin, etc. were for the lowlifes. That started changing in 1892 when the anaphylaxis killed out all the vineyards in France. Whiskey started becoming more the forefront. Then we had prohibition, 50s, 60s, 70s, slowly growing. And it was always a focus of light whiskeys. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that's why the encyclopedia is from 1970s. It says clearly a good Scotch whiskey is a light, soft whiskey, right? Obviously not a Macallan, obviously not cherry, right? So you ask for Moshe, Shaila ask any place like a Shaila, it's clearly not a benefit to have a heavy whiskey, right? So how did sherry enter the supply chain? A barrel sherry would come over from Spain. Sherry wine was not bottled in Jiri, Spain. It was bottled up, if it was bottled at all, like you'll see, beer is always on tap. It will come in a big metal canister. Again, there's no metal canisters for transport. Tradition was in a cheap oak barrel, thin wood, because it wasn't long lasting. Shipped it off to the pub in the United Kingdom. They'll drink it. Local distillery would take the barrel, put in their whiskey, let it age, sell the whiskey. 1986, the law changes, and there's no more mandating all sherry, etc. be bottled in Spain. They actually thought it would bring in more jobs to the area. Apparently, they weren't successful because no one here probably ever drank sherry. and that's not for cautious reasons. It's not a good wine. That was the end of the sherry story, which is important to keep track of. The distilleries realize they have a problem. The local distilleries, all their old friends that used to come and buy whiskey, are complaining about taste problems. Right? It doesn't taste what they're expecting. So they say, look what changed. They recently started buying their barrels from local coopers, local barrel makers. There's no wine in it. There's no sherry. So what's the immediate solution? Pour sherry in, right? Pour it right into the whiskey. Again, this is going to be very negaya, because as much as they'll tell you that they don't do it today, they do it today. Because everyone went from being a fine art to being a business, right? Or, most of the distilleries were on a local level. You sold to locals who came to appreciate like a local bakery, and all of a sudden they're all being bought out and made into hype. So you gotta have a certain flavor profile. But for the most part, they pour it in the wine, whatever it is, a bottle, 2 bottles, doesn't taste what they want, they desire. The next
Before they distill or after?
After they distill in the barrel, they'll pour in.
Sloshing or just
Not sloshing. The sloshing is that's also very common. We'll get there. So they'll pour in the sherry to give it the flavor profile. They were not getting the flavor profile that they wanted. They then tried to do some. This is 88, 89, fairly recent. They then tried to use some type of pressure, hydraulic, to push it into the wood, the wine. It didn't give the right flavor profile, which brought them to the next step. But until we get to the next step, let's understand what the barrel is. A barrel is a tree is a living species, right? And you have to use very specific wood, and this is going to be negated when you get to the clipper or not. What's going on? As everything, the tree grows. There's veins that run upwards to transport the water to the top. Those veins have a form of sugar in them. I think it's called xylax, hemicellulose, and thyllosis. These are just the different forms of sugars that, as a distiller, you're pouring in moonshine. You want those sugars to come out, okay, of the barrel to give flavor to your whiskeys. There's supposedly like 300 different chemicals in the oak, or whatever you want to say, flavors, taste, there's tannins, and there's all different things. There's only one way to get those to release, and that's through a blowtorch or toasting, right? So what you're doing is you're sticking in the fire, it dries out the wood, creates some type of crack. Now, and in addition, the chemical reaction of the fire changes the sugars, I guess, dries it out, lets it get released. Now, when you pour in the whiskey, the clear spirit, it will go cremate the sides of the barrel. A good distiller will, again, I play classical music in the distillery, others play hard rock. The reason being, you want it to cremate into the wood, into the distilleries, into the barrel. To get the alcohol, to get those sugars out. With movement, certain things evaporate. But that's what your focus is on, is to get those sugars out of the barrel. And in a sense, it's part of your recipe. Okay, if you want to put it down like that.
So you have to explain.
Okay.
You're saying the barrels give flavor to the whiskey.
The whiskey, important factor.
Because you first have to burn it by scorching it. That does some sort of chemical reaction to release it. And you need music also?
No, no. The music, I'm gonna get there. My idea is, okay, good, you caught me on this. The idea is that the alcohol, as opposed to the understanding until recently that the barrel was only there to hold the spirit, right? And then you'll go with the Taz or whoever it is of Hidei Klipa. It's an integral part of the recipe. You want the wood. Wood is like a piece of meat, in a sense, in this area. And you want some of the wood to float into the whiskey. The sugars that are in these veins, the hemicellulose, the xylax, to come out of the veins and to go into the whiskey. And the whiskey then goes into the wood, and there's a chemical exchange. Or actually, it's a liquid to chemical back and forth. And when you put the spirit in, you have to see how far you charred in the wood, in the oak. Let's say you got 1/4 of an inch. Because if it goes past there, it starts tasting like oak, right? It's very simple. You want only this part in, not that part in. Play heavier music, it's gonna get the wood, and you could taste it if you want in the stores and all the different products.
The music affects how much of the wood gets.
Comes in. It's vibration. Remember, it's pushing against and you don't want it to do too hard. So you have different levels of
I thought it's the blowtorch that's doing it.
that releases it. It makes like
So you do the
dried out
blowtorch
wood.
before- when the barrel's empty.
Empty.
You're doing the blowtorch.
Yes,
That's making it for you to pour in.
for the whiskey. Correct.
And you pour it in,
Correct.
and you start playing music.
And then you start playing music. Yes, it makes a movement. Right. So you clearly.
That sucks it out.
Yeah. You have a clear, everyone in the industry, from wineries to distilleries, some play music, some are reliant. The temperature also does it. But the idea is you very much need the interaction between the oak and the spirit. And in another level, if you look at the wood that you're using, don't argue. You're specifically using three types of oak: American oak, French oak, or at least in the whiskey industry, or Spanish oak. The reason being is because they have these sugars and they're going to give these flavors. It's very bedafka. Chestnut oak, other oaks are used for pickling and for things that don't have the flavors. So you're specifically picking these woods because it's a very integral part of the recipe. Okay? I don't know if this makes a difference in the halacha, but I'm saying it. Yeah, you can feel it, does it?
No.
Okay.
If you want to make it, it's just we're helping everybody also make whiskey.
Make whiskey. So, the next step. So now let's get back to what's going on with the sherry, right? So the sherry is obviously not kosher, right? Otherwise we wouldn't be here to discuss what's going on. But not only are we discussing sherry, we'll also discuss another issue that's prevalent in the industry: bourbon. Okay, you take bourbon. Most of the bourbons in the United States are owned by a Jewish family, and are not going to be chametz aval Pesach. Okay. They take the barrels. Well, they put in the bourbon, go through the process. After 7, 8 years, whatever, they empty them. A bourbon barrel is only used once. They'll ship them out to other distilleries throughout the world. Scotland, by law, requires you use a used barrel, and so a lot go to Scotland, and a lot of them go for tequila making. Now, remember, to make them for tequilas. Tequila is Mexico. Well, nothing.
Different types.
Yeah, another schnapps.
Lady stuff.
So then, it's very expensive now. Until recently, it wouldn't even get a mention in any book. So now we have to ask yourself, what numbers are we dealing with that are in the walls of the barrel?
1 second. So I just want to back up again. So there was a certain flavor that they discovered that sherry gives to the whiskey.
To the whiskeys, yes, they discovered that much.
How did they discover that? Because they had these barrels that were being used for whiskey, and then when they were stopped using those barrels, there was a difference in taste.
Yeah, they lost their clients.
Lost their clients. So therefore, they realized that the barrel was giving some sort of flavor. Now, what's sherry? Sherry is a kind of wine, which is yain nesach. So therefore, if they will use a sherry barrel, known as a sherry cask, it can maybe give flavor to your schnapps, causing it to be also yain nesach.
We're going to travel there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get the
Yeah,
shiloh
we're going to get there.
before we get there.
That's one shiloh. The other shiloh is the same thing for chametz aval Pesach. If you have chametz in the walls of the barrel, can you go ahead and then drink the tequila or whatever is in the barrel? They're all coming from the bourbons and the scotch and the tequila and everything.
That's what the word. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just bringing out the shots. I said I'm not getting involved. I'm gonna put out all the mitzvahs what's going on, and then we'll have the island all work out all the halachas.
So Scotch basically has this problem?
No,
It's not sherry.
You have to do a numbers count, the barrels count.
It's sherry, rum, and bourbon casks, right?
The rum cask is always a used barrel that came from Pinot Ricard, which came from the United States.
Which was bourbon.
Every barrel
was once bourbon.
Everyone,
Unless it was sherry.
Sherry, correct. Unless it was used for wine, but most of the industry in the wine, you don't come to whiskey except for sherry and a few others, unless there's a distiller that has an exception, because wine is aged in French oak. French oak is it gives off different flavors and is toasted, so it doesn't really. There's not a lot of interaction. I play with it because I can't get a kosher sherry barrel.
So I think sherry is not necessarily sherry, it's just that the primary wine that there's in those barrels.
By law, it has to be sherry. But the mistake,
U.S. law?
sherry whiskey, a sherry barrel by law has to be has to have only sherry wine in it.
I understand, but the Scotch question of having wine time in the barrel is sherry wine / other companies.
And port wine, etc. Yes, but it's not prevalent because you're not really going to take those. It's just not practice. It's not what's common.
What's that now?
To take other wine barrels.
Besides for sherry.
Yeah, besides for sherry and besides
So what was
for
significant then? The 1700s light whiskey was better.
No, because you have to know where the tshuva is addressing. I mean, the tshuva is being when you put out a tshuva and you ask the shiloh, right? It's clearly not what they were looking for in the flavor profile, right? That's what they're going to argue is when the Rav tells me if it says sherry on the bottle, it's usher. So what's the logic
So if you have
behind
an
it?
older tshuva, he's saying, and the Rabbanim said that it wasn't nice in time of Gam, and maybe because in those days that
It wasn't viewed as anything
that
special.
wasn't what they were
It was a
looking for.
cultural thing, whatever.
Yeah, I mean it's all marketing. That's we'll circle back to
It
that.
changed instead of like.
All right, so
Was the most bourbons? You said most bourbon distilleries are owned by Jews.
I think it's like 70% or something. Buffalo Trace is Cesaric Shapiro, Buffalo Trace, Pappy Van Winkle. I had the list last night. Weller's. I think 48 brands. That's why CRC has their list and everything. They can't spell it out for legal reasons, but this is why they have the list. Yeah, they signed non-confidentiality. I believe they signed non-confidentiality.
Because he has a kosher.
Yeah, he has a kosher one, but why did they do that? Anyways, right, but how did that come about? Read between the lines. He wanted to get a hechsher, and when he came to get a hechsher, they discovered he's Jewish, and whatever.
Does he distill all those, or somebody just distributes?
Do what?
All those brands that he distills, or just
He distills. He makes them. He makes them. They own them. I'm only dealing with owning. The middleman, I don't know. So now, let's ask yourself, is there a bittul? What's the numbers? And let's get to the sherry, back to the sherry. You have this barrel, it's in transport, right? You're sending it off from Bourbon, from Kentucky to Mexico. That's the case of the most common case they have of a bourbon. That's quote unquote chametz, right? We're not weighing in if it is or if it's not. Then we'll have the sherry wine barrel from Spain being sent off to England. So I personally transported a whiskey barrel, and I put it in the back of my truck, and I drove from upstate New York to my apartment. And I came home, and there was over 2 gallons of whiskey in it. I called up to work and said, "What do you drink?" I still have some over here. You didn't bottle it. He says, "No, I emptied it." Back and forth. I had to believe him, so I researched it. It comes out, the numbers statistically are, and a 53-gallon wine barrel in the walls of the barrel is about 10 liters, right? That's 2.5 gallons. Mine was a little smaller barrel of spirits. In today's day, there's something called, if you go online and find a whiskey, it's called the devil's share, I believe, right? There's an angel's share, the devil's share. The devil's share is what's in the whiskey barrel that gets stuck in the wall, because that's what gives you the hangover. That's why it got its name. Because the alcohols that evaporate the quickest are the ones that give you the hangovers. That's why
So your
aged
barrel
whiskeys
was
are.
empty before you were driving?
Yes,
So the shaking got the wine out?
yes. And that's what they do now.
So that's big hangovers from whiskey though,
Yeah.
instead of wine.
Well, wine also does, but wine when it ages it has evaporations. So now,
When it means aged wine, will give a hangover more.
less. Anything aged will give less because the alcohols that give a hangover evaporate at quicker than the alcohols that get you drunk. Let's put it like that.
Why is
There's
that?
a heads and tails because the heads come out of a whiskey still at 172 degrees, lower temperature. Heads give hangovers. It's a chemical.
It's chemical.
It's a chemical in the spirit, and regular whiskey goes at 185, 195. So now we have for Pesach, you know how much is in the barrel, how much is going to come out. And let's go back to sherry cask.
You know how much came out of your bottle? Maybe it was more.
Statistically, numbers. It could be more. It could be more. One of the eights that are done in the industry, and sherry cask was practiced like this for years. And again, this is important to know when the chuvas and what's addressing is. If you have a valuable spirit, right? For example, if you have real sherry wine, at that point it was popular, and you were sending a barrel that was barreled, you're taking the barrel from Spain, sending it to the United Kingdom, you will empty all the wine out, and you will fill it with a cheap spirit, a clear spirit. Okay, so now let's start the process. Nothing's quick. So you empty it out of all sherry, you put in a clear spirit, let's say it's a vodka, something cheap, and you ship it. It will probably take a good couple of months till it reaches the United Kingdom. You probably got a nice Suffolk on a year over there, right? what's going on today? What's going on in the industry? You have a barrel. There's no demand for sherry wine, right? And no one's drinking it. Definitely not as much as whiskey. So they pick all the sherry grapes. The best grapes they turn into wine. The other ones they do what's called spicing. They take barrels and they spice the barrel. They fill the barrel up with these bad, lower quality grapes, specifically for the whiskey industry. Now again, this is very important halachically. It's being done on purpose for one reason only. After 18 months, which is a legal minimum to call something sherry wine, they take that wine, they use it for paint thinner and to clean floors. For real, it's horrible stuff. Then they take the barrels and they ship it off to the United Kingdom to use in whiskey.
So they age this terrible wine in these barrels first.
Correct. It's called.
They empty the barrels and they use it for paint thinner. Now those barrels will still have absorbed sherry flavor.
Barrels. Right. Well, they're sherry barrels. They fit what they need to make a good mechira. Now let's ask ourselves: when they ship these wooden barrels over to the United Kingdom, what are they putting in the barrel when they ship it? They're not putting in clear spirits because it's cheaper to put in paint thinner, right? So they're leaving in the sherry wine. It's so right that Rabbi Pelsky said he saw or he heard that when they come, they're pouring out with wine, right? Now, okay, so we lost our year Suffolk over here for sure, right? The first one is, again,
You think you had a Yisha and you base Chaydish?
you had, because they were putting a clear spirit, so there was muckum to argue, right? With a clear spirit, something else completely possibly mitzvah of it, right?
In the olden days, they emptied it from the sherry wine, and then they had in it something that could stay in there for 12 months. So possibly that could do a kashering on the sherry wine. But now they keep the sherry wine for the
Which
No, you have 12 in Nesach, yeah, you're basically.
from when it had the sherry in it.
From it has sherry,
Are we
yeah.
passing like that, Raz?
Okay, I'm not getting involved in the psak. I'm giving the tzirufim throughout the process, right? Of what's transpiring. I'm not allowed to, by the way, give the psak. I'm under a hechsher. I can just tell you what's going on. Right?
What's that? So now it comes with the wine in it. See, they never empty it.
100%.
So you have also the whole trip is still full of sherry.
wine.
Okay.
Right now we get up to the next day. You're a whiskey distiller. You need a very specific flavor profile, right? And not only that, you're now owned by a massive corporation that's very sensitive to costs. And you get a barrel with wine in it, and you want it to have a sherry flavor. Ask yourself, will you pour out that wine? Or will you figure out how to use it in the recipe? The answer is, when the Rav from OK went on a fact-finding mission, when he approached the distiller, and he asked him to his face, he says, so do you pour out the wine? The response was, legally I have to.
Do what?
He asked the distiller, do you pour out the wine? His response was, legally I have to. And he repeated the question, and he was very disturbed by the response. So apparently he's leaving the wine in. And the reason again is because the art of making the whiskey, is not what's being prevalent. It's all cost driven, money driven.
So he's leaving the transfer wine?
He's leaving the transfer wine straight in.
So it's full.
No, you put in a gallon a little bit, just about
He's adding
whatever.
whiskey to that.
Yeah, so we have now this, it's done bedafka. Every step of the way is bedafka. Now we have to move on to the next nakuda. So
They want
What's
the
the
barrels
concept
before
of
they
that?
transport it or no?
you need to have liquid in it because wood will dry up and the barrel will fall apart. So you need to have a certain amount in there.
What's the concept of being bedafka? I'll be the timer or what?
Yeah, they want the flavor. They're going to tell you, it's an interesting, throughout the sugi, you're going to have this issue because they're doing it for cost, right? But then they'll market it as being a benefit, right? You know, there's a big debate amongst the quote unquote mumchim why it's classified as a sherry bomb. Is that better than a second fill, right? Now, a second fill is, let's do it like this. You get this barrel, you fill it up, it's going to have a very strong sherry taste. It's called a sherry bomb. So they'll then go ahead and refill it a second time when it's much more nuanced to sherry. So which one is better than the other? Which one tastes better? The real answer is whichever one you like. Right? But the Mumchim have a whole ganze
Every
Melacha
normal
put with
random
it.
person could taste it.
Yeah. That's why I brought these two. You'll taste very clearly that this one tastes like sherry, this one tastes like
That
rum.
one has sherry.
It's Cabernet, it's not sherry, and no one's making kosher sherry, but you'll taste the wine. Right? So they're clearly prevalent in the industry is to go ahead and play games, right?
To flavor it to save cost of putting on.
Well, that we could fight from today to tomorrow. They're going to tell you it's flavor, and it says clearly on the label sherry. That's why it says sherry, because it tastes like sherry. They're going to tell you it's a Milo. But is it a Milo or is it because it's saving money? The answer is really what came first, and then they'll market it, right? It's a very much dollars and cents driven industry today. It's not the art that it was, right? Now, they go. Let's move on to back to the sherry.
But even the sherry that's in the barrel is not enough to make it a problem before they pour out the wine.
Even if they did in the, I mean, it's not. That's going to be if you have kedei klipa, how you do the math on the barrel, right? If it's kedei klipa, if it's actually if you're factoring the walls of the barrel.
It's different taste, so I'm saying it's.
I'm not going to disagree with you again. I'm going to say just the facts what's going on. I do know what the outcome of the OK Tshuva was. That we should all be moving towards a hechsher. I was on the conversation. Rabbi Genek looked at me, and I'm getting sidetracked. Okay, Rabbi Genek looked at me. They put me on to discuss the sherry barrels, and so I decided to pipe up. They said they're not giving a hechsher. Anything without a hechsher any Scotch that's coming from the United Kingdom, Scotland, without a hechsher, and there's a blend, is because there's some sherry in the blend. Right. So now, what are they putting into the blend? Obviously, not a sherry that could stand within its own, right? Because if it could stand within its own, you rather bottle individually, and do the sales. So, but there's a much
stand on its own, much reason.
Meaning, people would buy it on their own. It's too sherry. It has a sour taste. The barrel wasn't so good, so they'll put it into a blend to get rid of it and collect their dollars and cents. So, the question was. And so Rabbi Genek said they don't certify any Scotch without a hechsher because they couldn't get one. That was basically what he said. They all know it adds value to the spirit, but they're all blending in the sherry at some point. So then someone piped up, but a lot in Scotland they use second-hand barrels and they'll keep them for 70 years. So he asked, what are the numbers? So I said the first barrel, let's say, is 90% sherry taste. The second one will be 40%. What's left in the oak, or the initial taste, and then it's 10%. So he says we still can't accept it. But anyway, so the numbers, the sherry is always, once it's in there, it doesn't leave. It's there, and some of them will prefer the second fill, right? So then, if you're looking at the second fill, so then we could get into discussion of Yud Beis Chodesh, right? Of it being filled with another liquid for Yud Beis Chodesh, right? But
Your base fetish is when it's empty.
it's empty, right? So
Not when it's filled with the second.
okay, but there is a discussion, and again, I'm not going to go if it's a proper discussion or not. That we could debate later. But the idea is the yubit because it's supposed to get yavish, right? And over here it's not yavish. Fine. But at least there's something better on the second fill because it takes out the flavor and everything. He wasn't willing to work with that. So back to the sherry. So now we have. The Minchas Yitzchak has a very interesting tshuva, and this is, and he wants to say that there's a zevazet geirim, right? What's a zevazet geirim? That you have the oak flavor coming out with the sherry. It's a combination of both entering the whiskey. So, understandably, that should be. We have proof from our first case that that's true. When you pour wine into the whiskey, it didn't alter. It wasn't what they wanted, right? It was a different profile. So his argument is, the wood changed the flavor of the wine, right? However, the question is it zevazet geirim, or is it the way you bake a cake, right? Is it just the two? For example, when you make a recipe, sometimes you put the eggs, the liquid separate from the flour, and that's really one of the arguments on going that way. Ramesh's tshuva, right, and that's what Reb Shlomo Miller is very much based on, is that if there's more than 1/6, I'll put this one backwards. If the wine is less than 1/6, so then it's nice and tam gam, right? and that the Taz says it's across all alcohol, right? Which would be, the Shach disagrees. However, let's look at what the prevalent wine that we're discussing is sherry import, and what we might should use the term in the blender, which is very interesting. The kuda that he has in this tshuva.
At that time, I thought they were going into it.
They were using the barrels, but I was going to point out this.
It doesn't say that.
Correct. So, you have to know what Minchas Yitzchak is talking about. He seems to be implying of a blender to bring specific tastes and specific profile, and it could be. Ramesha would argue. I don't know. Again.
Before the 80s, the shoe was.
Right. But
When did they start? I thought they were working with barrels.
they were working with old wine barrels. It could be then from what Ramesha's psak, and this is done in the industry. It's called a blend. You want a specific profile. You're allowed at 2.5% of every whiskey is allowed to have unidentified thing in it. No one wants to know about this, And so you got to even out the flavor taste. It's not put in. For example, one that's prevalent is glycerin. That's why some vodkas are delicious. But don't tell that to your vodka, aficionado that can tell the difference, because you can tell, no, it's pure vodka. There's a lot of glycerin in that thing. Hopefully it's kosher glycerin. Tito's uses kosher glycerin. They don't write they have glycerin. If you look online, you can find it someplace. I believe. Again, maybe I'm just mixing up companies. But there's 2.5% that's not identified that you're allowed to add in according to U.S. law, which generally speaking, the U.S. and the United Kingdom and Scotland are more or less going to run the same lines. Canada is Wild West. We'll leave them out for a few days. But so Ramesha's tshuva is clearly talking about a blend. We could be mechalik when it's a barrel. The Minchas Yitzchak is specifically talking about the barrel. He seems to be more lenient. However, both of them, I don't believe if I recall correctly, discuss the issue of the reinforced wine. It could be yain is only nice and tam lefgam when it's still wine, but if it's a reinforced spirit, right? Meaning to say, what's the word for the grape juice? When the whiskey are concentrated, right? Let's think about it. You concentrate the spirit. You might need a much higher number. And when you have the distilled spirit involved over here in the wine, in the port or the sherry, so then it might be a different ballpark that we're discussing. What time is it? I'm gonna go.
Reinforce the wine with the whiskey.
107.
Reinforce the wine with the whiskey.
They reinforce. So the way it works is, with sherry and port, is they go ahead. They take some of the paint thinner. They take some of it. And they'll distill. They'll take the wine. Let me go through the whiskey distilling process. I skip that. Might be of some importance because we're going to get back to the hummus issue on that. The way the distilling works is you take corn, you take whatever the material is, and you ferment it. The way you ferment it is with a yeast. So you'll put corn and rye. You'll never do corn alone. You'll put a rye in. You'll put a wheat in, you put something in. The reason being, corn in itself doesn't ferment. Right? It has sugars in it. Sugars are eaten by the yeast, which turn into alcohol. However, in itself won't ferment. So you need to use a rye or a wheat to be what will be the davar maimed, right? To aser it for Pesach, because it's important and you need it. Shlomo Miller seems to not agree with this. I try to get my hands on the tshuva. The person told me he'll send it by today, never sent it to me. So I don't have all the details on why he disagrees with this. But simply, that would be the understanding. And after this wash, it's called, gets to 8% alcohol, 8 to 9%. You'll take the liquid, you put it into a whiskey still. The whiskey still is this big round pot with a little neck that goes up and around. When the fire turns on, what happens is that alcohol's boiling point in a normal environment starts at 172 and goes to 205. Give or take a few degrees either which way. However, the alcohol will travel up the neck and take with it some of the water and go around and out. The question is, and this comes up for Pesach, what is the chametz and what is not the chametz? Is this panum chadashus balaka? Right? Is this a new face again, this is also a question that's brought up in Italy for distilled wine. Is this a new phase? The Malbach, everyone is very in Italy. They were drinking yain stam. They were definitely drinking distilled spirits that were made from grape skins. And the question was there any reason for the heter? Yeah, we'll leave that on the side. But that was in Italy. Now that they distill the spirits, the wine or the beer, depending what it is, you have a big vat of alcohol on the other side that's always clear, unless you did a bad job. It's no matter if it's grape, no matter if it's wheat, no matter if it's potato, it's always gonna be the same color. The Marsham, right? Marsham, who was it? The Marsham on the bottom of Shulchan Aruch Pesach says you can't be mechalik and you can't drink hard whiskey on Pesach. Because he asked for the rum coming from the Caribbean and the United Kingdom. And it didn't stick this issue, that's for sure. But he says nothing because you can't tell the difference. The Aruch HaShulchan holds what came out of the whiskey still is chametz gomer. What stayed in the done right, what stayed in the bucket, he would seem to hold maybe wouldn't be fully chametz, but the chametz when you have grains fermenting. Grains, corn, whatever, is the fermentation. The alcohol is actually the chametz. Everything else is the byproduct. OU, just to pick on them because they're the easiest, because it doesn't seem to necessarily hold like this. Mishnah Berurah, they point towards the Mishnah Berurah on Gavina, that's made from a yeast that's chametz. However, I asked the Rav from OU, he said that's incorrect. They fear that it's chametz gomer, so I just maybe have to update their chuvas. But apparently, or I could have just seen them misquoted somewhere. But apparently, they hold that Weller's Buffalo Trace. I approached one of them. I actually videotaped it if you want it. It's one of the Rabbanim, and he said Buffalo Trace, etc. is chametz gomer. That's on how they would fear based on the Aruch HaShulchan. Right. So another one. So now let's go back to distilled wine spirit, right? That's being used to reinforce the sherry and the port, right? So our issue is the reinforced spirit. The reinforced spirit is, let's say, it's going to be roughly 90 zexaneinzika because it's the most efficient, or 60, 70 when you put it in. Right? We're taking, let's see.
So what's the question you're trying to get back to?
Getting back to the sherry.
Shir bittul. Moshe says on the Gemara that says 1 and 6 it becomes ICI.
Correct.
That was when it was in a straight wine. But what about
when we're concentrated? Right. It's a davar charif.
Concentrated wine, which is now also included in the mixture, which was absorbed into the barrel wall. Which is now
we don't know if it's wine yet. We first have to progress. We had to establish our Aruch HaShulchan hold that's wine. It's yain gomer. Right.
But he had to tell that maybe since it went through a distilling process,
it's panim chadash.
Right. So if we're going to make that it's called wine, now what
do we even have enough? Right. So let's first say that. And we're not going to learn that it's like davar charif because there's a whole maracha that even if it's distilled, it's a davar charif, and you can't. It's going to ask for everything, right? Again, I'm just putting out all the ideas out there. I might be talking too many details too quickly. However, the spirit comes out. We're going to put in the sherry wine. Is, let's say, 12% when you ferment and 9%, you're putting another 6%. It's really not a lot, so you're not going to get to higher than 1/6 because we have 2.5 gallons of wine. Let's just look at the numbers. 2.5 gallons of wine coming out of the walls of the barrel. I'd say they left a gallon and a half to transport in, so it's 4 gallons. Then we're going to add in because another. Even if you double it, which you're not, it's still 8 barrel. 1 second. Well, my numbers. We're not getting 1/6. Even 8 gallons. No, we have to hit. Yeah, we're getting within range, no? 1 second.
I don't know how much a barrel holds.
A barrel's 53. 53.
48 and 6.
Right. So we're getting within range.
8 and 9.
It's a 6. So we're getting. I never caught this. Talk gave within range. Okay, listen. I'll have to look this up. I never did the math.
Why never double it?
No, because let's say you fermented at average wine fermentation is, let's say, 8 or 9%, right? Then what they do is when they put it into the barrel, they reinforce the wine from 8 or 9%, in particular in Europe, to 21%, which means they're putting in a tremendous amount of distilled spirits, right? So, and all that's still in the barrel. So if we're doubling it, right, because they double the alcohol content, and we're counting the 1.5 gallons. I never had this.
Why does that make the wine considered a wine now?
Well, again, it's the concentrated wine we're opening up, right? In the sense it's like concentrated grape juice. You're just opening it back up with the whiskey, so you're going to have a very high number over here, right? You're getting much stronger than what we had to begin with.
A lot of it's because of the sugar that you put into the wine, so that's just new alcohol.
No, what sugar? There's no sugar.
How do you make the alcohol content rise to 21?
So they have regular wine, right? Put it on the side. Then you have the wine that went through the distilling process. Okay, when you distilled the wine, it goes up the gooseneck. It now comes out at 70% alcohol, 80% alcohol. Okay, it's very high. It's concentrated. It's exenisic. It's what it can knock you out. You go ahead. You have a barrel full of wine.
That's very high content right now. That's
Why
wine.
not? That's why it's such a high alcohol.
What?
Most of the non-sugar alcohols, you're taking a lot of the wine out. So that's
What do you mean? No, because the Aruch HaShulchan's disagreeing with you. The Aruch HaShulchan's understanding what's left in the bucket over here, that's not wine. This is wine. What went through the whiskey still. Where Bavadia asks, and he's matmiyah. But he says the question would be for the Svar. It's more prevalent. I'm not sure why for the Svardim, but it's a bigger issue for them. And he says the bishul over here is mashpiachet. So he wants to know why we don't make hagafen. That's what he's very busy with. But it's clear to him that it's wine. Reb Chaim Meiser writes that there are those that are not like the one that's considered wine, and ve'en limchos because they have who to be saimach. So again, this is if you want, you can start either which way. It happens to be the one that's makel on it. This is heresy. I didn't get the chuvas because they told me they lost the chuvas. Is a sefer called Beis Yayin, written by Chaim Meiser's cousin. That's right on with Tzvi Hirsch-Krasinski. This was Rav in Omaha, Nebraska. He wrote Beis Yayin. He actually made wine in California, and he probably had 2 chuvas wine that's not usher at all. Okay.
Distilled wine.
Distilled wine. Just totally distilled.
That's what I'll say.
It's right? However, I never got my hands on those chuvas. I was told when they put out Sefer Beis Yayin, where he seems to imply that it's aser, they were going to publish the chuvas in the back, and in the Shemayim, the guy who owned them lost them. So I don't know. I can't help on that one. But Chaim Meiser clearly knew someone that was of caliber that was mattered, and that's why he says Rein Lumchos. Right. So there's definitely those that say that it's not Nachshav Yain. We just don't know who to put the blame on. So.
If it is called yain, why is it considered more yain now that it's concentrated? Maybe it's just. Maybe you just. No, so okay.
Because when you add the mayim to it, it goes with the new shear. So he's saying that.
Consider that as the sheer yain?
No, after what the original shear are going to go with.
You're reopening it up.
What it can't be shrunk it.
Hard, but a lot of the other parts of the wine is
Right, but the Aruch HaShulchan's learning the other parts is not what's the chametz and it's not what the yang.
After you add the water, right? So here you add the whiskey. Is
right, but the problem is that's not how the Aruch HaShulchan understands it. He understands and provides us an understanding that alcohol is the wine, the rest is a byproduct. Oh, for the tam. Okay, I hear. How do we define tam? I actually was asked. They were trying to define tam for you, and it's very difficult. The Rav from OU asked me the same shaila. He says you pick up a wine blindly. It says on the black musket, and you drink it. And Reb Shlomo Miller is busy with this in the tshuva that I got is that when you look at the wine, if you cover the blue on bottom of the Chinese black muscat, don't look at what it says on bottom black muscat. You won't check any black. You won't taste any black muscat. You won't taste any of the cherry when it says hint of cherry. The minute you read it, then you hit it in your head, right? And then it clicks, and also you can never taste the wine without it. The question is, what's tam? Shlomo Miller says that sherry is not tam at all. It's all reich. That's what he said. That's another one of his hatayim, whatever. That it says, and it says, the mumchen taste it. It says, no, they're smelling it. Right? So maybe reich, Figure it out.
See, when they close their nose and drink and they don't taste
You don't taste anything when you drink something with your nose closed.
Alright.
It's always a circle. What? For rare, you know. So,
So one second. So I want to get back to the numbers again.
the numbers again. Ramesha says that there's no 1/6.
There is no 1/6.
I mean, we're being samech on 1/6. That's what we're being samech.
What happens by the second and third fill?
So Maisha seems to be talking about blender. That's his lashon seems to be right. Pouring it. Right? Yeah.
You're saying it's not like that.
I'm just bringing out that it's likely, if you do the math like this, that you could get higher. But Belsky stated clearly that he sees wine pouring out. Mitzias in the industry is that you transport with the wine in it, not like they used to do with a clear spirit.
You saying the whole after is the Reicha thing?
So, I don't know. They put it on the label. So how do you evaluate any expert? Look, I did a private label for a guy, and the guy was marketing it that it had notes of vanilla. A guy in the liquor store, he tells me if you tell anyone anything on a whiskey, they'll taste it. This guy with the pill.
Does a layman taste it? A regular guy can taste it.
So how do we quantify what it is? Let's try it out. That's what we brought this to see if you
From
taste
your
it.
experience, what is the random guy in the street can taste the difference?
It depends. A sherry bomb, yes. Once classified that.
Sherry cask, like they call sherry cask. Not sherry.
I don't know.
Sherry
I don't
cask and
drink.
Sherry bomb.
I don't drink.
Think sherry bomb is the same
I
thing?
know.
Sherry bomb.
Yeah. That's why I brought it for them to try the differences.
You're
See
saying
the
the Reds
difference.
didn't know that it was the wine was still.
It's a different. I'm just bringing my. He doesn't. I didn't. That's my point. It could be he disagreed on then the concentrate. Each
Agreed on what the context that's
Yeah, no. He could really hold that. He could have held that there because the time that they're taking out. That clear spirit is not considered chametz. Is not wine.
What things I'm taking out?
Because it's still what's left on the side is the tam, not this clear spirit. He called it panim chadashis. Hey, I'm just giving moving parts over here what to work with.
Why should it be public if they like this?
What? Oh, they said good. Some little hoes you can't change the Gemara.
You can't change the wine.
Yeah, it's nice and down. That's what he holds. Based on his time. Shach disagrees.
Is there a bunch of say the chazusa messes up the dental flour?
Yeah. Yeah, there is. The color, definitely.
But is that called chazusa? You don't really see this.
Yeah, you know.
Chaim, what do you say? Chazusa. You don't see it.
You don't see it.
You see this. It's darker. Is that called chazusa? It's not. It's a darker color.
Try this is the Cabernet. You'll taste it. I can talk for forever. I'm just putting out all the details.
So then your bindle's out the window.